Today, we'll be discussing botulism and tetanus. These two diseases are caused by the presence of these little guys named Clostridium. Here we have botulinum, who looks like a little candle with his spore there.
Trust me, you don't want me to introduce myself.
And tetany, who looks like some kind of medieval blunt implement with his.
I would consider myself rather sharp, actually.
Both are gram-positive bacillus anaerobic motile spore-forming neurotoxic bacteria with an unfortunate habit of regularly killing people. Or, if they happen to be feeling nice, severe flaccid paralysis or uncontrollable muscular contractions. Since both are obligate anaerobes, they tend to die horribly if exposed to air. However, their reinforced spores they retreat into are much more resilient and can lie dormant for ages, waiting until they stumble into a new oxygenless and nutrient-rich environment to call home. Tetany is the one you've most likely already heard of, as it often manifests as the ever-present danger associated with sharp, rusty metal, with a cut being a good reason to get a tetanus shot. This is largely a myth, as rust itself has nothing to do with tetany. It's just that something that's been exposed to the elements for that long has probably had enough time to get covered in the tenacious spores of his mean little germ. You're really just as likely to get tetanus from a shiny nail, or scratch from a local unpleasant animal. Relying on stabbings as a means of travel is all well and good, but botulinum decided it would go for a different approach. Food. Here, assuming the food was improperly prepared or stored and kept in some form of anaerobic condition, enough for some growth prior to being eaten, they will happily launch an invasion of your body from the inside out. Although, if he happens to be around stabby objects, he'll gladly go for the usual tetanus route. Historically, neither of these bacteria are exactly new and have been killing and inconveniencing our kind for as long as we've existed. Nowadays, though, they're significantly less of a threat. They were first properly isolated in the late 1800s by Arthur Nicolaier and Emil van Ermengem, and since then have been considerably studied and cultured. Surprisingly, often for the use of their agents of destruction, they're toxins. The main toxin of interest is botulinum toxin, the most toxic substance in the known universe, tetanospasmin coming in at a close second. The unique numbing neurotoxic capability has seen significant medical and cosmetic use throughout the world. You have probably heard of it as this little thing called Botox. Yes, this little bacteria may love killing you and eating your body should you die, but his toxin can be surprisingly good at making you pretty. If paralyzed, wrinkleless facial muscles could be considered pretty. Oh, and since both toxins are obscenely deadly, with LD50s around 1 nanogram per kilogram of an animal's mass needed to kill it, they could both be used in bioterrorism or murder of some other description quite effectively, assuming one has the means to culture and purify the toxin. Ah, now here we have an interesting sight indeed, the infamous aforementioned botulinum and tetani. If you're listening, you would recall I said botulinum and tetani form endospores, one of the most resilient forms of any living organism. Within these desiccated, impenetrable shells, dark forces slumber, ready to awaken and bring death.
Okay, I think they get the idea, getting a bit melodramatic there. We are just simple bacteria with a simple wish to survive. We're not really evil. The spores let us retreat into an invincible shell until it's safe to come out. Oh, goody, here comes one of you cretins now.
Moving on, I see an anti-vaxxer has stumbled into our midst. Unbeknownst to them, endospores of botulinum lie in wait in their homemade peaches. What a sore twist to an otherwise innocuous evening. Thus begins the war on the nerves.
Freedom!
Well, now look who's being melodramatic. I know you can't see me, but I'm rolling my eyes right now. When consumed by a human, the spores of botulinum soon find themselves within an anaerobic, moist, warm and nutrient-rich environment in your digestive tract. After tanking the intense acidity and conditions of the stomach, arrival in the small intestine is all the motivation he needs to come right out of his shell.
Alright, we're in. Time to have some fun. I hope they enjoy my presence.
The botulinum toxin begins hijacking the nervous system by binding to receptors in the neuromuscular junction, causing internalization of his toxin. When this happens, the light chain is released from the vesicle into the cytoplasm of the nerve terminal. It then cleaves the snare complex. No, not that one. That's better. The snare complexes are the key player in the binding process for exocytosis of substances, and by cleaving it with the light chain, the neuron is prevented from binding or releasing acetylcholine from the neuronal membrane. With no nerve transmission, the neuron is completely blocked, inducing flaccid paralysis.
Never stood a chance.
So, what if our good friend Tetani had infected our hapless ignoramus instead?
Oh, you're really a lost cause. Tetanolysin, do your worst. Ah, that's too localized. Tetanospasmin, go. Toxin bind to inhibitory interneurons.
A wise choice. The tetanolysin toxin causes damage to viable tissue surrounding the infection. However, it's limited to the localized region on the host's body. Now, the tetanospasmin is practically a death sentence, acting as a Trojan horse of sorts. It becomes retrogradely transmitted to the central layer of the inhibitory system.
Anti-vaxxer, eh? Well, these aren't exactly the brightest bunch of neurons around.
Oh, don't be mean. You'll hurt their precious feelings. Anyway, it is here that tetanospasmin's heavy chain binds to gangliosides of the alpha motor neurons. These become internalized and discharged from the dendritic spine of the neuron, passing it into the junction of the glycinergic inhibitory interneuron, which normally releases glycine.
I'll make him an offer he can't ever refuse.
Quit interrupting my amazing battle analysis. Where was I?
Hold on a minute. Tetna, you can't just steal my mechanism of action. You only change the target so it disables inhibitory pathways in the alpha motor neuron, inciting spinal and facial muscles to contract uncontrollably.
And just like that, Tetani spazzes man. Time for a backstage tour of how we keep things on the down low. You, whatever your voice's name is, your services aren't required.
Oh please, do you have any idea who I am?
Ah, sure bud. Okay, I'm not usually one for sharing trade secrets, but you're special. Just kidding, you apes took ages to figure out our May outline. I'm getting worried I'll never get to revel in the moment you reveal our intricate plans. Now let me show you how I evade the host's immune system.
Tetna, you're getting carried away again.
Now, because the toxins we make are so potent, we only have to release a small amount to damage the host. This amount is so small it can go undetected by the immune system. One of the reasons why we're so deadly. Also, if an immune response does trigger, it's usually after we've caused the damage. But anywho, if we're to release enough toxin to be detected, we would have to face the host's immune system. The body has many lines of defense, the first being the skin, which we've already evaded.
Well, when an open wound is created, the usual response of the body is for mast cells to secrete histamine and recruit phagocytic cells. But this is not what happens in Clostridium tetani infections.
Exactly. I don't cause this classic innate immune response. I just slide by entering the circulation. We folk of the clan Clostridium are silent but deadly.
Wow, okay. Now I'm rolling my plasmids. We get it. Onto the adaptive response.
Right. The adaptive response. Still no match for these guns.
The adaptive response most likely begins after damage has already been caused, when APCs or antigen-presenting cells, such as dendritic cells or macrophages, begin to engulf tetani and present its antigens on the surface of their membrane. This is basically to let the circulating B and T cells know of the infection. Once they encounter the antigen, a number of processes begin.
Yes, when these white blood cells encounter my antigen, clonal selection and expansion occurs, where masses of these cells with a specific receptor are created.
The T cells differentiate into cytotoxic, helper, and regulatory T cells, while B cells created become memory cells, which unfortunately aren't going to be any help at the moment. They're useful if it ever comes back. The antibodies produced by these plasma cells are the main immunity noticed in Clostridium infections. IgG antibodies have been particularly linked with Clostridium tetani infections, initiating processes such as opsonization and the complement pathway, another cell lysis pathway. They even have the ability to bind to toxins to prevent them from interacting with other cells.
Wow, you never shut up, do you? Congratulations, you're correct, but this still isn't enough. Apart from potency, another theory as to how I evade the immune system is about my SLP, surface layer protein, that interacts with the host cells and or immune system, facilitating my survival. Anyways, enough about me. What about the host immune response to you, botulism? Hey!
What you said.
You're kidding me, right?
We basically elicit the same response though. The only minor differences are that the antibodies produced when I cause infection are IgG and IgM, and that I lack surface properties that allow me to interact with the host cells. Either way, I'm also potent and slide past the immune system just as easily, so make that two of us.
Oh boy, I'm starting to feel bad for all the hosts we've destroyed.
Don't forget, we don't always win though. Ever since they created...
Don't say it. Don't say that which must not be named.
The vaccine!
No!
Okay, let's get serious now. Tetani can manifest itself in three forms: generalized, local, and neonatal. Unfortunately for you, generalized tetanus is the most common form. The initial symptoms are trismus, most commonly known as lockjaw, and masseter muscle spasm.
Unfortunately for the patient, I've not yet affected mental status, so spasms are experienced with severe pain. I am in so much pain.
Local tetanus presents itself as persistent muscle rigidity close to the site of injury, and this rigidity may linger for weeks. Neonatal tetanus is generalized tetanus that occurs in the newborn. Symptoms begin with irritability and poor feeding and rapidly progresses to generalized spasms. The portal of entry is a freshly cut umbilical cord, and these babies usually have no temporary immunity passed on from their mother because their mother hasn't been vaccinated.
I also cause fatal events such as dysrhythmias and myocardial infarction. However, the exact mechanism of these syndromes is unknown.
On the other hand, botulism could present itself as wound, foodborne, infant, and in rare cases, inhalation botulism. Infant botulism occurs when an infant consumes foods contaminated associated with botulinum toxin, in particularly honey. Inhalation botulism is rare and does not occur naturally. It is usually associated with bioterrorism. Foodborne botulism typically presents 18 to 36 hours after ingestion of contaminated food. Its first symptoms are nausea, vomiting, and diarrhea.
I think I have food poisoning.
Invariably, botulism patients start with symptoms and signs of cranial nerve palsy, resulting in blurred vision, loss of facial expression, dysarthria, and dry mouth. Currently, no specific laboratory tests exist for determining the diagnosis of tetanus. The diagnosis is clinically based on the universal symptom of lockjaw.
What? I have tetanus?
Wait, you only just realized?
Oh no, I have botulism. I should let the clinician know about the close contacts I've shared food with.
That's nice, dear. Either way, saying this now is vital because if the patient's case progresses to respiratory failure, they're not exactly going to be able to talk for much longer.
Uh-oh, they're on to me.
In wound and inhalation botulism, incubation periods are longer before toxin can be released. Other than that, symptoms are quite similar to those of foodborne botulism. Symptoms in infants, however, include constipation, loss of appetite, weakness, an altered cry, and a striking loss of head control. Diagnosis of botulism is usually based on clinical history and examination, followed by laboratory confirmation, demonstrating the presence of botulinum toxin in serum, stool, food, or in a wound. Antitoxin drugs are administered in order to neutralize the toxins. After recovery, patients still require active immunization through tetanus vaccinations, as tetanus infections don't provide natural immunity against repeat episodes.
Nice try, humans. You never get rid of me.
What, you're still here? Ugh, anyway, a vaccine against botulism exists, but it is rarely used as its effectiveness has not been fully evaluated, and it has demonstrated negative side effects. What do you say to that, tetanus? Yeah, that's what I thought. Anyway, the Victorian government has a number of programs and laws regarding these two diseases, such as a free tetanus vaccine. Meanwhile, the World Health Organization is striving to eliminate neonatal and maternal tetanus, as well as to improve response to botulism outbreak. They're definitely succeeding, as cases of botulism have been steadily decreasing since proper food preparation and storage has become much more of a thing. Now, boys, do you realize how much of a problem you've been to people?
WHO is in the band, dude. I mean,
And that, ladies and gentlemen, is tetanus and botulism. Good day.